Turned it on already? No, nothing.
Oh, wait, oh, you,
Oh.
Ready. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our fifth iteration of Anything But Vinifera. Yes, one time for your fill. Thank you for coming out. I know that it's still pretty early on wine time and we have a pretty full house. So hi, Emmanuel. Glad you're here. We have a pretty full house, so thank you. This first panel, we didn't want to call it ABV 101. That's kind of lame. We named it Community Land Access Politics class. These are the pillars that we essentially build around. And I'm gonna shout out Chris and Kathleen, who have been to more ABVs than I have, which is all of them. I am the founder of this thing. Just real quick, all four of these people that you see beside me have really contributed to the foundation and the culture and the makeup of what makes today today. Not only do we go to Brooklyn, we travel in the winter. We do this twice a year. And each of these folks have something really significant that they continually contribute to the culture. This is really a thought partnering process. We are friends in real life. This is something that is built continually. So I just wanted to share the platform with them and kind of have them speak to what this has been like for us. So I am going to do the introductions and then we'll start to pick everything off. As mentioned, Jade Marley, founder of ABV. I also have a little distribution book under the Romance Collections called By the Hand. I represent a good amount of the producers that you're trying out here right now. Special shout out to George and Sophia of Big Sake who are continually donating the things to us. Year after year, it's been fantastic. We have Erica who's walking in the blue shirt back there. Erica is one of the board members and has been, founder of industry sessions, just invaluable to what we do. And then Jim Fry, if you don't follow along with him, probably the most gifted educator industry-wide. He's selling some of his, great children back there. He's awesome put this together. So immediately to my left, I have Bianca Stannon, former proprietor of Paradise Books and Bread down in Miami, Florida. And she will be relocating to New York soon. Right beside her, we have Kathleen Cherry, farmer, fermenter, futurist, just a magical human being. So grateful to have her here. She traveled quite a way to be with us today. Shout out to her. And Tinosa Amampai, sales representative for Skirmish. And more than that, just I think one of the great minds of wine in general. Really fluid in all spaces, just by way of being held in a very high regard for the amount that they study, the amount that they taste, the amount that they travel. It's just an invaluable resource, not only for us, but for all. So thank you. And Chris Renfro, founder of the 280 Project. Chris is traveling from San Francisco. So quite a ways to be here, really cool for you. Thank you. So before we get to questions, I just want to give you slightest glimpse into, for me, and my life and what we built here, what these folks have contributed to today. So after our first volume of ABV, which was really just a glorified tasting, I immediately knew that I wanted to go down and partner with Bianca down at Paradise. What she did, her and her partners, what they did, it was a worker owned co-op down there. Shout out to Audrey, shout out to Brian. Really was create a space where we were able to have an informed conversation about solidarity economics, starting from a really high level, because they have held and built space time and time again. Their book selection did a lot of the groundwork, a lot of the works that have informed us as a community, and just really laid the platform for one of the magical times of my life. I know that people up here feel the same, just 3 days of jubilation and community and real fun conversation. So thank you for that and continually built on that. Kathleen grew up in East New York, not too far from here, and really, it's a testament to the concept of land calling out to you. Kathleen over and over again has just been determined and unapologetic to be in the space that you see here now, which is somebody that is able to ferment what grows right there. You know, I think the imagination and seeing something raw that grows on a tree or that grows from the ground and then imagining what it could be in another form. That is artistry, that is talent, that is futurism. And that is what Kathleen does and inspires us all to do. So thank you. Espinosa, and I will shout this out over and over and over again. This was their idea. We were on an East Coast wine trip and after experiencing producers that really they just didn't know. They were trying to plant all the wrong things, vintage after vintage, they were losing their crop, they were irrigating, they were uprooting vine, they were just eating land into submission. And then right beside that, we were visiting folks in Vermont and New Hampshire and Maine who were having the opposite experience by really embracing hybrid grapes, native grapes, regional fruit and life. And Etsy was like, yo, how great would it be to get all of these people in a room for a grand resource share? Like we just need to talk to each other. And that's where all of it really started. So shout out to you and thank you. And Chris at the end here is a great community builder amongst us. If you are not familiar with his work, his partner's work, Janaea, with the 280 project, internship program is something that's based out of Alameda Farm, out in San Francisco, which is a community garden where they are essentially getting the youth back to land by way of farming and fermenting grapes. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Just inspiring not only to us here, not only to our community, but I think industry wide and how effective and how special this space of the wine industry can be if we just allow it to. So thank you. All right, so we're here to talk about community, land, access, and politics with this first kind of point. We're going to talk about community. Using the concept of ABV, anything but vinifera, working with what grows locally in abundance. How do you feel participation in the production, consumption, and the study of fermentation is encouraged and valued within our communities? And when I say, and when we say in our community, very obviously we're talking about diaspora communities, we're talking about Black people, we're talking about brown people, we're talking about queer people, we're talking about our communities at the intersection that are so often pushed to the margins. And what we have found is community has enthusiasts within that. So I'm very curious, Kathleen, how do you feel, you know, in dealing with these kinds of raw materials that it has really brought community in addition to the wine into what you're doing? Yeah, I think people, so when we're talking about specifically like I think when I try to make my the grapes that I use are pretty unusual. Combining it with like maple sap or apple historically on a global scale is not a new thing, but in our current climate, it's not really seen that much. So I think when I'm like trying to follow the community, when I'm naming the thing, or putting in the package when I'm ready to present it, I think I try to follow cues of like what is familiar. So I made some wines. I did like a can series, and the names were all Toni Morrison inspired.
Yeah.
So like first one was Beloved, second one was Song of Solomon, third one was The Bluest, and on the can it had the on. And I think I had the opportunity like for The Bluest to root of Black women, and I'm like, with the community specifically that I'm making this form, and to kind of see the eyes light up, feel like, oh, this is something familiar. The wine what's in the can might not be so much, but I think there's like heart opening type of thing. Like, oh, I want to know what this is about. Yeah. Yeah, awesome. I think you know, in addition to that, we sometimes can get pigeonholed into like what a wine is. When we're speaking on this panel and we're speaking in this room, wine is just fermented, fill in the blank that you drink. That is the wine. Cashew wine, awesome. Pawpaw wine, get in it. So I just want to set the stage for that as we're speaking. We're going to be saying wine. This is what we need. And I think that oftentimes we speak about ancestral ferments. That's what gets me really excited. A lot of us in this room, a lot of us on this panel, trace our ancestry back to the Caribbean. And I was hoping that Kathleen again, we can open it up a little bit. Can you tell us about your Florida water ferments?
So I'm like kind of speaking into this mic too, but for the people on the internet. I think so the folks don't know what Florida water is. It was made in the 1800s. It's a Florida water that goes to bedding, think about doing that in America, in slave folks. So they were using this product, some things that they couldn't do, they couldn't practice their religion openly. So they would find ways to inside like using tools that wouldn't endanger them. So there's a practice of using Florida water, mopping the floor to the naked eye. To them, they were like cleansing the room and doing like a ceremonial. I found out about Florida water. Her salon, she was wearing a bottle of it at Met Gala, and I was like, "What is this?" I got super curious, and I was like, "Oh, people wear this as a form of protection away from crystals." And as a fermenter, I was always trying to like all in ancestral knowledge or like things I've come before. I was like, is there a way to make this consumable? And I got some lessons from folks who make it on a daily basis, and they're like, oh yes, this is like different. So I felt comfortable moving forward with it. I use a lot of apples, and I knew that they can kind of carry a lot of herbs, Florida water. It's very fruity. You understand it has roses, rosemary, lavender, orange peels, cloves, really aromatic. So I took bits of those things. At the time I was in Vermont, so I wanted to make it of the place. So I also added spruce tips, and added maple sap, kind of leaning into that water. And kind of capture that and having sections of that being like something you can consume as like a beverage, but also if you want to use it in vein of protection in this way that people like historically when we talk about like wine, it was many times used for ceremony of divination. So I'm definitely always trying to my thought process all in all of that to my wine.
Thank you. I do know that one of the people that was a resource for you and gave you these blessings you connected with in Happy Birthday. Yeah, at ABV. So I think that that's a good toss up just to, hear from you, Bianca, about building community-centered spaces. With ABV or without ABV, just what it looks like to have a community-centered space, a true community-centered space within what we all do, which is marketing.
Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, I think, ABV, I think we talked about it a lot. And I think some people kind of try to understand ABV. Is it like a community? Is it a collective? Is it a tasting? Is it a summit? Like, it's sort of like all of those things wrapped in one. And I think there's being practice, and we're like incorporating that with ABV this year. And I think that that's exactly what community-centered spaces should be, is actually like making community a real tangible thing and not just a sort of like concept or idea of community. And it incorporates
all of these things. It incorporates the people, the producers, the consumer, the buyer. It's sort of like this entire thing that makes ABV what it is. A lot of times when people kind of like toss around the word community, and I get a little sensitive about it because it's not just like people being friends. Like it's not just people hanging out with each other. It really involves a lot of trust, a lot of conversations, a lot of leaning on each other, resource sharing, like you mentioned before, which I think is what makes ABV important. What makes a community centered space is important. I feel like sometimes I lean on some of the folks that I've studied personally, or that like myself, Brian and Audrey, my partners that were formerly in Paradise, we lean on these thinkers and people who sort of like thought about these things prior to us, and sort of like how do we incorporate that into our day-to-day life. So right now I'm sort of pulling from Fred Moten. For those of you who don't know who that is, he's a theorist, he's a Black American theorist, professor at NYU, poet, and he co-authored this book called The Undercommons. And this idea of the undercommons is basically what lies beneath and beyond institutions of control, who exists within those spaces. And at the center of it, it's always marginalized people. What exists in these sort of like greater spaces that we understand, that are like the ones that dictate the standards, the ones that decide what's important and what's not important. Beneath that is always the people who are pushed to the sort of outskirts and decide like this is what we do. This is how we gather. This is how we share information. This is how we've always been. And so like for me, that's always at the center of my mind when it comes to community. Is like, who are the people who have always been doing the thing, regardless of what everyone says is important or not. And I think ABV is that in real time. So that's my answer.
Well, thank you. Chrissy, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to this, or if we can go on to the next. You're good?
I think it's a good segue into
Land. Domestic wine growers and producers have been vocal over the last several years about the struggles that they have encountered systemically. Many say the industry is not viable as it stands. Some point to land subsidies for regenerative farming in the EU as something that our counterparts benefit from, and that puts us at a disadvantage. Some call out the harsh conditions climate change has ushered in. Can we discuss a vinifera dependent industry in this context, and the work that we are collectively doing to try to break away from that? And I would love to start that with Eddie.
yeah, sure. I mean, I think with that, I just think about, you know, kind of how this all came to be with ABV, and kind of all the travel that I had done from 2020 up until that trip that we took, you know, up north. And I really started to notice, like, you know, you keep hearing the same things, right? Like, you know, took a trip with Yurka in 2020, and we were in California and Oregon, and you hear these things about, and we were literally in Napa when the fires were going. So we had the smoke like in our lungs. You could see the you know, the world is burning, literally. And having these conversations with producers, talking about like, you know, climate change, being alone and not feeling that they were, you know, they felt like they were in their own isolated cell. And then this one here, and I also met you on this trip. And that was really kind of the seed of like thinking about like, well, how do we get all these people together? Everyone is talking about the same things, but no one is talking to each other. And then I think too, then going to that trip when we went to Maine and New Hampshire, specifically focusing like on hybrids and, you know, and, RAS with what they do. It was just like, wow, this is like actually what people are doing in their own specific communities, their own community building. We can actually put this all together, like you said, put everyone into a room, get them all to talk, get them all to resource build, in a way where we're sharing this information with everyone, so then they can take that information back and bring that to their own communities. And I think that that is really where the power lies. And I really love that you brought up, because I had never heard of this theory. But I think when, when thinking about marginalized communities, there's also like a sight in that, right? Where you can kind of see the whole picture in a lot of ways that, makes it just makes it, for me, I say for myself in terms of like existing in all these different spaces, ABV, but also in the more conventional wine world, including external. I feel like I kind of see this bridge or this link where, we can bring all this information together, and really, really make something better. And I think like literally what this is growing into now, seeing all the producers here, seeing all, just how much it's grown. It's really incredible. And I think that to me is the way. Sorry, that was very convoluted, but I think it's just really that linkage of different communities, and bridging that together. Yeah.
I do want to mention that yesterday, for the very first time, we had a day one of the summit that was just for industry folks. We had a huge resource share for our producers, where they got to pick the brains of buyers directly. They got to pick the brains of importers and, successful thought leaders and people who are very important about logistics directly. And it was huge. And that really was what that initial kind of vision was. So it took us 5 tries of just building up enough momentum, but we finally did it. So it feels like this is the first time we were really able to like execute that. That's awesome, which is great. The second thing that I want to mention, this is not something that we necessarily publicize, because I think it's something that takes a lot of nuance. And one of my least favorite things is when ABV gets lumped in with the greater DEI conversation within wine. We dig around here. We are very focused and deep, at least we try to be. And all of these versions, what they are ultimately leading up to, and I have a feeling that it's going to happen when we travel down south into North Carolina and Virginia, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to connect with Black land stewards, full stop. That's what we want. We want to bring more Black land stewards into the fermented conversation, whether that be approaching them, whether that be approaching them in order to source, whether that be encouraging more Black folks to take what they grow, what we grow, and ultimately ferment them. That's the goal of all of this. We are not myopic in thinking that we can just throw a bunch of folks into a room and it's naturally going to happen. You're trying to bring folks that have the resources, that have the know-how around in order to share and kind of as a buffer. But that's what this is. You're trying to incubate. Shout out to Lee Campbell, who actually just launched her incubation program down in Virginia. So just to provide more context on why you see the various steps, that sometimes might seem a little disjointed or might seem a little singular, it really is all building up to this space.
I just have one more thing to add to, just to put in the context, like you're having this conversation now. Sure, you've heard, people on the internet talking about California and like how we need to be embracing like more California wine and domestic wine. And it almost to me seems like the conversation or the things that have come around it have been are kind of missing the point entirely. Where it's like you have bigger producers that are saying like, we need to buy more of our wines, but like they're not actually interested in the smaller community building. And this is the actual work. This is what it takes to build this. This is not just going on social media and putting something out. And I think that is what sets ABV apart, particularly because it is really that intentional connecting with people. So
yeah. And just, for those that may not be aware, agriculture is one of the top contributors to global warming. The carbon emissions in conventional farming is absolutely crazy. That's why regenerative farming is such a big deal now. Some say regenerative, some say ancestral. We're all talking about what the people that have an intimate relationship with this land have already accomplished, kind of one of these Sankofa concepts looking back to go forward. And with that, and thank you for bringing up the social media conversations. Chris brought up a really great point a couple of weeks ago that, if we take these hybrid grapes and native grapes, sure, I could leave San Francisco and I can go, work some land elsewhere, but this is my home. And this is where I feel safe. And I wanna move on to access, and I really wanna give you the floor to expand on that one, but two, to speak a little bit more in depth about 280 projects. I think one of the most special, components of this is Chris is really laying down a blueprint. So if you get inspired by any of this, take it and run with it. That's the whole point. So yeah, please.
Yeah, so I think the conversation came about because I saw the post on social media about thinking about other options besides California. Right now, where I live in California, it's super expensive. It's very hard to live there. But it is also diverse. I feel like it's a place that does accept people of all walks of life, but financially, it's not making sense. Access-wise, it's not making sense. Being really close to, I guess, the mainstream wine industry is like very eye-opening to what people are really trying to do, and they're not trying to open up. So I just had like an interview the other day about how I feel about the industry, and it's like, I don't think it's really changing that much. I don't think that people are really opening the doors as much as they say they are. For years, I've been asking for help trying to figure out land, and it's for these specific reasons of sharing the land with people that look like marginalized people that need properties to be able to feel safe on, practice growing, knowledge share together, just community building, actually being in the same spaces, spending time. And it's weird, it always comes back to how much does it cost? Somehow in people's minds, they just can't give something away. You know what I mean? Even if it's gonna burn down, even if it's gonna burn down, even if it's gonna be flooded in a few years, they still can't grasp with it's mine only. You know what I mean? So that part's really scary, but I, at the same time, feel like I have to deal with that because I don't know what it looks like living in other parts of America. I moved to California specifically to get away from racism, classism of certain types, all the gender bias, everything. And it really does worry me, especially with everything that's happening politically right now. And it's crazy that just this week, we're seeing some of the craziest shit happening. And I think about it and I'm like, I hate paying almost $4,000 a month in rent, but I don't know what it feels like to go somewhere where I have to worry about getting pulled over and maybe not coming back home. You know what I mean? And all of that really ties into the land sharing, everything. For me, Sonoma it's beautiful, it's more gorgeous than Napa, but it's not safe. Sonoma has so many Trump flags, so many people that you would consider rednecks and stuff like that. And it's really hard because these are just people trying to live too. But it's really hard to have those conversations where you're like, people that look like me just want to have land so we can grow food, so our kids can learn how to grow food, so they can be able to take care of themselves. And what I'm seeing is that it really takes organizing by people that actually care to figure out the money. And it's getting really scary because it doesn't feel like it's happening fast enough. And during the pandemic, I watched a lot of the land get absorbed, get taken away. And where I'm at, I'm with some of the biggest companies in the world that buy wineries, that buy vineyards, that buy water rights. And we are not part of that. And for me, I'm like, what does it take for us to do that? Is that grants? Is that, working with politicians? Is it generational wealth? You know what I mean? And what is so scary is that even the Black elite, I don't see them working. I don't see them doing anything. I see them on social media showing that they support everything we're doing, but I have never seen the money. I've never seen the land access. I've never seen them create the programs that we desire, So it's really hard. It feels like I don't want to complain, but I'm like, if I don't say it out loud, then people are just going to be like, well, what's happening? Because San Francisco is dope, but it's not perfect. It's super tech. It's very divided right now. And it's somewhere where I feel like if that place can't be a kickoff for all of these ideas, then where do we go? You know what I mean? But I am proud that people are doing this in Virginia, that you guys are doing this from here in New York. And I think it just takes more of these conversations, because when people say there's a wine problem right now, I feel like it's the old wine they're talking about. You know, I feel like natural wine has gotten a bad rap because of certain flaws, all kinds of stuff like that, flooding of the market, people that look like us coming in and just having an idea, wanting to do something, but people are like, well, why do you feel like you can do that? You know, and this is competing with people that have had land forever, money forever, and they don't want us here, you know, and that's what I see, or they would be helping invest. So I don't know, I'm just very proud of this, and like, thank you for asking that question, because it feels a lot.
You're doing some really important work in San Francisco, so.
Should I talk about that part?
Yes, please. I was gonna say, like, you know, what's going on in Virginia, it's happening here, but it's going on there because of you. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's happening.
Yeah, so I run a very tiny vineyard in the middle of San Francisco. It's called Alamany Farm. The vineyard project is 280 project. It's off the 280 freeway. It's next to the lower income neighborhood of the projects. We run a 6-month apprenticeship where we pay apprentices to be able to get into wine in a holistic way, in a real community way, where we go and we're actually meeting with allies, people that want to put their time forward. Not everybody has the money, but some people actually have the land, they have the space, they have the wine, they have the knowledge, and they give it away. And that is valuable, man. When you think about people being able to share that and not make it feel scared or uninviting, and actually welcoming people for harvests, any kind of information that they want, giving their actual phone numbers out, not just emails. Where can they be found? That feels special, you know? So this vineyard is literally, I could throw a rock at poor people's homes, and all those poor people look like us up here. But it's powerful because they are right next to a free public farm where everything on that farm can be taken at no cost. It doesn't work though. The way that America has destroyed the confidence in people of color and being in the land and farming is real. I see it. I see that processed food, that alcohol, not just wine, all of these things, they're not appreciated. They're not, you know what I mean? Like, it's something where I feel like we've been so disrupted. When you tell a kid, go play outside, they don't understand just climbing trees. They don't understand picking up vegetables or an apple, you know what I mean? How do you reprogram somebody like that? You know what I mean? So it's been years of trying to farm, trying to talk to people, getting kids into the vineyard. And it's been like 4 years, but like now I literally can walk through that neighborhood and I know every single person. Oh, sorry. I know every single person, you know what I mean? So yeah, it feels special. It feels very special.
We'll get everyone else in this conversation real quick, but I do just want to share an exchange that you and I had years ago, Chris, that I think about like often. And we're speaking about, you know, biodynamics and energy exchange in the vines. And you shared how, you know, just this image of Black youth playing in the vines being shooed away. And how really that's the best thing for these vines. It's the joy, it's the life, it's that energy. And if you are claiming to abide by all of these things for the energy exchange and for the health of the soil, the health of the vine, the health of, you know, the ecosystem, why is this where you choose to draw that line? And, you know, you can respond to it now, but it's something that I want all of us in this room to kind of hold, in that these concepts go far beyond just race. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that for me, I'm just doing the work of that others did for me. Literally, I was inspired by people that showed me how to share, how to care, how to be there for people that you say you really love. And it's easy. People act like it's complicated, but it's like sometimes just give the little things that you have. You know what I mean? That's all you have to do. I tell these kids, I'm like, you plant this vine, you will be able to come back here when you're an old person and see the work that you've done. You know what I mean? And once you plant these vines, you can go learn how to grow other things. Then you can teach your friends. Then eventually you guys can get your own properties. And imagine where that keeps going, you know? Oh, and I also got to host HBCU students, 50 of them over the last 2 weeks. And if you could hear the dreams that these young kids have, we're gonna be all right.
Okay. I think that really lends itself well to just speaking about political activation in our space, not only as it pertains to land, land access, who gets to steward, who gets to hold rights to land, but also, when we're speaking about policy. And if we think about the wine industry, and hybrids and native grapes specifically, one of the major draws is their, ability to thrive without irrigation, is their ability to thrive without doing much to the land, without, picking up carbon, but actually fixing it and regenerating. And I would love to hear, from you, Bianca, about youth wine as a tool for holding, spaces of political activation.
Yeah, so I think, and I feel like we've touched on this a lot during this conversation, and I think if we think about wine from more of like a holistic perspective and not just like this final, beverage in the glass, I think we can get a better understanding of how we can engage politically, because, obviously wine in and of itself as this thing that we're drinking may not necessarily be a vehicle for politics, but if we think about wine in terms of like the land access, who's allowed to drink it, who has access to buy it, how much it costs, who we're supporting, and who's farming like the fruits, whatever it is. I think that's when we start having that conversation about politics and solidarity, right? And we're not talking about just representation. We don't want just to, as much, it's all good and fine if you buy a bottle of wine that's made by a Black person, but we should actually care about what that means. Like, what does it actually mean for that person's life, for the people in the sort of like supply chain? And I think that's kind of why a lot of us are drawn to natural wine, right? Because it's like, not only is it just something that's outside of what we're used to, like we feel like we're actually participating in a greater conversation. And I think it kind of like goes back to what ABV is. It's not just like, oh, cool, I'm drinking something that's made from grapes that aren't European varieties. It's more of like, I am having a greater conversation about what it means to have land access. What does it mean to support a bottle by 280 Project? What does that mean, right? Like, what does it mean if I'm buying a bottle of wine from Vermont made by this, small collective of people who are just trying to do something different? So, and I think a short segue to that of like doing something different is there's something really powerful about being able to imagine what's possible outside of what we're used to seeing. And I think that's a huge vehicle of political activation, is sort of like, what is possible? What can we do? What can we achieve if we try to start thinking outside of what's constantly being fed to us as like, this is what wine is, right? Like, this is what it's supposed to be, and anything outside of that is a wine. So I think it's more of like this greater conversation of what's inside of that.
So on that, I think this is our responsibility to think about politicians, think about money, think about that's what they think about, and how can we fuck with them? You know what I mean? Something as simple as like green energy. So I've been saying this for years, like Rivian, an electric car company. If you are in wine country, you see lots of diesel vehicles all the time. Something I've thought about is like, how do we get wineries, vineyards to switch over to electric vehicles? I think the money saving on that, you know what I mean? Everything about carbon emissions, that's something motivating, you know what I mean? But I feel like we have to give those ideas. We have to collaborate in that kind of way. How do we make them money, but save our planet and also give us access, you know what I mean? And then maybe we get funding from them for coming up with these types of ideas. One other thing, and this will be the last thing, when we think about Black people being on the land, in California, Black people were mining gold. Those mines are now vacant. Those mines are now sold as mining claims. You can get them for very cheap. They're on water. They have water sources. This is something that I feel like we could reach out to like Gavin Newsom, California government, be like, reparations, maybe Black folks get to use mining claiming land. You know what I mean? Maybe something like that can be given back. I feel like we have to really think a little bit bigger, because nobody's trying to give us anything. We have to like almost trick them into it, you know?
I think that really goes into greater community building, which is, really at the center of why the room looks the way that it does. It takes all of us focusing on this. The burden, the work, the labor does not belong to us. It is for our collective benefit. And just to piggyback on what you're saying, I want to shout out Sydney Love back there. Who's doing incredible work and sharing the lost histories of Black people working land in the wine industry down in Virginia. Just incredible and years in the making, and just thank you for being here. Thank you for the work that you do. Just incredible. So we're coming down on our time. I don't know if y'all have any last things that you would like to share about.
You should all subscribe to Sydney's Substack.
So come say hi. Chris is gonna be pouring back there. We're gonna be mingling throughout the room. This was very much like a theoretical, philosophical kind of 101. We didn't talk about what a native grape is. We didn't talk about what a hybrid grape is. If you have some questions, please go check Jim's slides. Great kid, neighborhood educator. He will school you. And thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for keeping an open mind. Thank you for respecting space and giving us grace as we continually grow and evolve. Yeah. Thank you. The room, wait, please, for this next one, if you can just.
Oh, shit.